to our president, J.L. Belon.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It looks like half of our attendees are current fans of Doug Pace, and after the session, the rest of you will be fans, I'm sure. Before I introduce Doug, I've got a couple of announcements that I wanted to share with you. Let me just look at our number of participants. I just want to make sure that we give everyone the opportunity to join because we have a vote today on our board slate that we're going to be presenting shortly. So let me, just got a couple of announcements. I would like to encourage you, if you have not already given or contributed to the Be the Cause campaign, to please consider that. It's a great opportunity to support AFP Global, to support the initiatives in fundraising, advocacy, scholarships, and continuing education, and so much more. A portion of those gifts do come back to the chapter, so make sure if you do make your contribution online at AFP Global that you are selecting the AFP Tampa Bay chapter, and ask again at the end of the year that you are considering that, and I appreciate your consideration of those contributions. We have our New in the Profession Committee that has just announced a mentor-mentee program. So we are excited that this is going to be a new initiative to pair veterans in the profession with those that are newer in the profession and create great relationships and foster some more networking within our chapter. So congratulations to Amanda Jacobson and Amanda's committee for bringing that to fruition. This is my last official meeting as your chapter president. I've been honored to serve for the last 2 years. And I do have the opportunity to write a final president's message that I owe Chandra. And I'll summarize all of the great accomplishments of our board that's worked so hard over the past 2 years in that. I won't go through that here, but I want to highlight the Tampa Bay Philanthropy Week Committee and the Programming Committee for making such major adjustments in this COVID year that we've all found ourselves in. These two committees have just been outstanding in the response to our chapter, to this COVID environment that we're in. And so I want to thank those committees especially. And I'd like to thank the executive team, Donna Houchin as treasurer, Kathy Raybon as secretary, Debbie Sokolov as president-elect, and Sarah Leonard as immediate past president for serving alongside me. Their incredible work ethic, their leadership, and their guiding of our committees has just been phenomenal. And I so appreciate the executive team, and I thank you. I would like to introduce Sarah Leonard shortly. Sarah's actually going to be rolling off the board, and Sarah has been a great resource to our board. She's actually served 2 terms on the board. And Sarah, we will miss you when you are no longer officially on the board, but we know that we can reach out to you and ask for your advice. And I thank you so much for everything that you've given to AFP Tampa Bay. At this time, I would like to officially call the chapter membership meeting to order, because this is not only our last meeting of the year, it's our annual meeting. And I'd like to call on Sarah Leonard now and the Committee on Directorship to present the 2021 board slate. Sarah?
Thank you, JL, and thank you for the great job that you've done. Okay, just making sure I'm unmuted. I just want to remind you, if you're a chapter member, you're going to have an opportunity to vote on this. So either go ahead and unmute or be ready to unmute. So as the immediate past president, I served as the chair of the Committee on Directorship. And now I have the pleasure of announcing the 2021 AFP Tampa Bay board slate. If we were in person, I would ask these people to stand. We can't, but let me assure you, they are a fantastic team. President Debbie Sokolov, President-elect Kathy Raybon, immediate past President J.L. Belon, Secretary Devin Dominguez, Treasurer Mike Halady, Planet Philanthropy Florida Caucus Brenda Rouse, Programming Co-Chair Laura Grams, Programming Co-Chair Ornella Varchi, National Philanthropy Day Chair Holly Moon, a member at large of the board focused on young in the profession, Amanda Jacobson, Membership Chair Megan Heller, IDEA Chair Linda Breen, Ethics Chair Suzanne Ruley, Be the Cause Alicia Copley, Education Dana Bramlett, and Scholarship Michelle Robinson. So the Committee on Directorship has moved to approve the 2021 AFP Tampa Bay Board of Directors slate as presented. This comes from committee and therefore does not require a second. I'm going to ask if there's any discussion. I'll give you a minute. One of my fears in meetings is I don't unmute fast enough to discuss. So one more time, is there any discussion on this slate? Hearing none, I am going to ask if there is no objection. I will call for a voice vote. Is there any objection to a voice vote? Hearing none. Was that objection? I heard something. Okay, hearing none, I'm going to ask the typical all in favor say aye, all opposed say nay. So I would just like to ask members of the chapter to unmute yourselves, and I'm calling for a vote. So all in favor say aye.
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 All opposed say nay. Okay, so it's clear to me from the voice vote, and if anybody else disagrees, let us know. But I would like to say congratulations to the 2021 Tampa Bay AFP Board of Directors. I have a little message for them and for you guys as our chapter. You may not be surprised, but early in my career, I had trouble with authority. And a very wise mentor taught me to trust the people in the room, making the decisions. And I'm stepping out of that room, but this group that we just elected is stepping into that room. So I would encourage us as a chapter to support and trust the people in this room. Congratulations to the new board.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you and congratulations to the 2021 board of AFP Tampa Bay. We've got a poll question that I would like to ask the group. It's regarding the CFRE. The CFRE, Certified Fundraising Executive designation, is how today's fundraisers show accountability, service, and commitment to making a difference for good. More than 7,200 professionals from over 20 countries are currently CFREs. And so we're planning for 2021, and I'd like to ask you to answer this poll to share your interest in a CFRE class, a review class. And so if you'll please answer that. And while we are waiting for those results, our January meeting, we will be inviting Jason Lewis to do a presentation. He's presenting a half-day session. He was supposed to be here earlier this year, but the world had different plans for us. So we are going to be bringing him in virtually in January. So please visit our website for more information. And for the order of the meeting, I'm supposed to officially adjourn that membership meeting. So Kathy, I'm officially adjourning that membership meeting for our minutes and for the record. So did we have the answer, Chandra, from here we go? Yes, we've got 41% that are interested and some that are maybe. So that will really help our committee on programs and education and make a decision for the benefit of our chapter. Thank you so much. All right, I'd like to move us along and introduce Doug Pace now. Doug is the CEO of Stonehill Innovation. He's a transformative leader and an advocate for blending human-centric design, strategic storytelling, and data science to drive exponential growth. Doug is a community leader. He serves on several nonprofit and for-profit boards. He's a mentor and a trusted advisor. Doug served and is currently the immediate past chair of my foundation board at Lions Eye Institute, and will be serving as the chair of the Institute board of Lions Eye. I'm so glad that he is joining us today and giving us the benefit of his experience and wisdom. And Doug, take it away.
I'm scared about the experience and wisdom part, but I will entertain. How about that? Everybody, I am very excited to be with you today. I know many of you on the call. I'm seeing the faces. It's actually surprising how many people I know. As JL said, my name is Doug Pace. I'm CEO of Stonehill. My background, I used to own a interactive agency in town called Bayshore Solutions. Sold it about 5 years ago and took some time off, and then started this firm probably about 4 years ago. Just last year, we were U.S. Chamber of Commerce Emerging Business of the Year. So we've been growing pretty fast and doing pretty well. What I want to talk with you about today, I'm going to share my screen if I can, is how to leverage something called design thinking to improve donor experience and increase fundraising. Sound good? Everybody see the PowerPoint? All right. So let's go ahead and start. If we were in the same room, I'd be asking a lot of questions and trying to get a lot of feedback. So I'm going to try to do it virtually and we'll do all right. If I asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. Everybody knows who this is. It's Henry Ford, obviously Ford Motor Company, Model T, very well known for industrial engineering, most of all. Think about what he means by that. If I asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. What do you think? Now, when I look at this and I think about my clients, it's really hard for people to think, I guess outside of the box would be the easiest thing. If you ask somebody what they want, they're going to give you back an answer that's in their context and what they know, right? It's really hard if you've never seen an iPhone before. It's really hard to tell somebody you want an iPhone. It's really hard to tell somebody that you want that technology or that new app that came out. You know, think about things like Airbnb. 10 years ago, we would have never thought about staying in somebody else's house overnight and, you know, for a minimal amount of money. But now it's a common thing. Well, it really, some of that question is answered by something called design thinking. Design thinking is pretty well known. I'll get into it in a second, but I always ask people if they know about it, do they think it's a methodology, process, or a mindset? Obviously, each one of those is a little bit different, methodology, process, and mindset. Sometimes I get back all three. Sometimes people will pick one or the other. Well, I like to argue that it's a mindset, because if you know anything about design thinking, it's used differently by all the people that use it. So for instance, on the screen, SAP has 9 steps. IBM has 7 steps. The model that we use is out of Stanford University, and it has 5 steps. We work with a very large company called FIS, and it's 9 steps because it was important to them to define some steps. So my argument is if it's different by everybody that's using it, if it has different steps and different processes, then it's not really a methodology. It's more of a mindset of how you attack something. At the end of the day, it's focused on being agile and customer centric. So what do I mean by agile? Fast, right? Move, pivot, move forward, and then customer centric. And that's the most important part. It's all about the end customer. What does the end customer want and what do they do with what you need? Obviously, everything is foundationalized in multidisciplinary teams. So what do I mean by that? Have you ever tried to solve a problem before and you grab somebody you work with all the time, and you come up with the answer pretty quick. Well, you know how each other works, you know each other's strengths and weaknesses, and it's pretty easy to work together. If you had two accountants in the room, there would be one answer. If you had two engineers in the room, there'd be a slightly different answer. But the brilliance of any solution to anything is when you get people with different lenses. If you get an accountant and an engineer together, then you can really solve problems. And that's what design thinking is about, is solving wicked problems. So why are people using it? As I said, they're using it to solve problems, but it's at the intersection of desirable, viable, and feasible. So desirable, pretty easy. Humans want it, right? You're desirable to somebody, you want it. Viable, it's financially possible. It's very important, right? We can all dream of things that we want to do. JL and I are actually just in a meeting yesterday. We have some very big plans on what we want to do with Lion's Eye, but man, the financial aspects are going to come in the way, and we got to find money for it. And then feasible, we can do it with the technical know-how that we have today, right? Because you might want to do something very innovative, maybe do clinical research, but do you have the technical know-how to do it today? So the intersection of that is where design thinking plays. So how does it work? As I said, we're a Stanford kind of purist, and how we show people is using the 5 steps: empathize, define, ideate, prototype, test. This is all based on trying to solve a problem the same way a graphic designer or a creative would solve a problem. So empathize, what does that mean? Well, we want to empathize with our user base, with our customer, with our donor. We want to really get a good understanding of what drives them from an emotional aspect, from a financial aspect, from a physical aspect, and look at it from multiple different ways. And we'll talk about each of these in more depth. Define. Well, once you do that, what do you want to solve for? What's the problem that you're trying to solve? A lot of people ask me, well, why does define go second and not first? Well, if you've ever tried to solve a problem before, sometimes you get in the middle of it and you go, well, the problem we were trying to solve for wasn't exactly the problem. And we found that out after we got further in. And this is trying to say, don't go ahead and solve something. Stop, empathize with your user, and make sure you're solving the right problem before you try to solve any problem. Ideate. This is how when you start coming up with solutions to that definition that you had. It's good to go wide, not deep. What I mean by that is come up with as many solutions as possible, not take one or two and go very detailed with it is. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in detail. Then prototype, very specific word here, prototype. Get something out that people can touch, feel, see, so that you can explain your ideas. It could be a marketing prototype. It could be, the start of a campaign. It could be an idea for a donor to donate to. It could be a lot of different things, but if you don't get something on paper, it's hard for people to understand exactly where you're going. And then finally, test. Once you get that prototype, get it in front of people, see how people react to it and change it. Design thinking is all about getting things out as fast as possible and having empathy for people, but not being afraid to fail. As I said, it's all about empathy. We're seeking to understand people. We're trying to see their world in their context, discover what they're really trying to do, understand their feelings, and understand why it's important. That's a lot of elements, but it's very important, right? Seeing their world in their context. We all have different context, right? Even the same person might have a different context in a similar situation. For instance, we have a client, we work with an airport. If you are a business traveler, what are you trying to do? Your context is you're trying to get from point A to point B as fast as possible because you have things to do. If you are traveling with family and you have 3 kids and your wife and multiple pieces of luggage, it's a different context. So same person, different context. Remember, we're not logical. We're extremely emotional beings. Everything that we do is driven by emotion. We like to think we're logical thinkers, but we're just not. So this will come into play as we talk about how to apply it. And then experience the entire journey. As you're starting to understand somebody's context and starting to understand a person and having empathy for a person, you want to understand the journey. So an easy way to do that's a journey map. We'll talk about that, but it's before, during, and after. So a restaurant would be an easy example. How did somebody choose to come to that restaurant? What's the experience that they're having while they're at the restaurant? And then what do you do for them after they leave? How do you get them to come back? You know, the fundraising is no different, right? Before, how did you get somebody interested in your cause? During, how do you get them engaged? And then after, how do you keep them coming back and possibly even pushing a little bit further? But regardless, we're trying to create experiences for everybody, because if we can create unforgettable experiences, it makes the rest of the job much easier. Meaningful experiences satisfy a need at the right time in the right context while appealing to our values and providing a bit of surprise. People ask me about values all the time and how important is it? And one of the examples that we have on screen that I'll talk about, values can drive a lot of different things, right? If you share values with some people, you can get some things done. You can move their emotions towards you. You can get them aligned to your cause. Providing a bit of surprise, everybody likes to be surprised a little bit, right? It keeps you on your feet. It keeps you interested, and that surprise stays with you. Some examples on the screen. The first one, obviously an MRI machine, but this MRI machine is in a children's hospital. The background of this was it's a pretty famous story. They were essentially trying to get scans of kids. Obviously, the machine makes a loud noise. The physical surroundings are kind of imposing, and they weren't getting good scans because the children wouldn't stay still. So they simply added story on top of it. They added a story about going underwater through a tunnel in a submarine, staying away from an octopus, and if you didn't stay still, something was going to get you. So they changed the context, they changed the whole story, and all of a sudden they got what they wanted, right? The individual in the MRI machine stayed still, and they got a great scan. And it was a good experience. The one right below that, Patagonia, recycled jeans. Their jeans actually sold out when they first put them on online. And this was all a values play. It was based on our jeans are better because, you know, we use less energy. We use recycled materials. There's no GMOs going into it, and they sold it. So people gravitate to it. Patagonia also has a pretty famous case study in regards to their zip-up vest, like I'm wearing. Don't know if you saw a few years ago, a lot of investment bankers were wearing their zip-up vest and putting their logo on it. It was almost like a badge of honor. If you had the Patagonia zip-up vest with an investment banker logo, you had finally made it. Well, Patagonia started looking at it, and a lot of the investment bankers weren't making investments in items that aligned to their values. And they came forward and they said, we will no longer put investment bank logos on our vest. So obviously they alienated a whole audience, but what do you think that did for the rest of their audience, their core audience? It brought them even closer to them. So pretty daring move, but pretty significant. Up top, everybody knows the Disney Magic Band. This is one of the most amazing things, not just because of the technology that you can use this as your room key, as your credit card within the Disney parks, and as your ticket. But the amazing thing about it is how connected people get to the actual band. When I do this in person, I ask people if they've ever seen one before, and people start raising their hand and going crazy and telling me about the colors that they have and the zebra print one that they have and the last time that they went to Disney. Man, one small piece of technology drives how much emotion and how much connection to an organization. And they don't remember the technology part of it. They remember everything else they have. They remember the story of being there with their family. And then finally, and probably the most simple one that happened to me, I was actually in Denver with my family on vacation. And we were at the Ritz-Carlton. We checked in. My daughter put all her stuffed animals on the floor, and we spent 5 minutes in the room, then went out to get something to eat. Well, the team within the hotel came in our room not too far after we left, I guess, and started to clean up. And they put my daughter's dolls neatly stacked on one bed. And on the other bed, we saw this collection of items, the stuffed lion and things along those lines. It was an interesting surprise. Now, I come to find out later that every team member at a Ritz-Carlton has a budget. It's around $2,000 to make guest visits unforgettable. And obviously, as the team was in my room, they looked around, said, obviously there's a young lady that's in this room and loves stuffed animals, and they spent some of that budget. Now, for me, the stuffed animals didn't do anything. It was a nice surprise, but not much for me. But for my daughter, it changed the connection to the brand, the connection to their story. And, the funny thing is, when we go on vacation, I'm looking for hotels, and what do you think my daughter says? Hey, are we going to Ritz-Carlton for that night? Pretty interesting, right? The influencers that we have. So this is all great background in design thinking, but how do we use it for fundraising? I like to talk a lot about the experience economy. I do this in multiple different ways, but man, this economy that we have, especially with the pandemic, is amazing. That, we expect when we order something from Amazon that it comes next day, maybe even a couple hours, depending on where you live. Anybody remember going to school back, 20 years ago when you'd order the magazines and you'd wait almost the whole school year until you got the magazine? So it's crazy to think that 20 years ago, we would order something and wait 3 months before we got it, 4 months before we got it. And now if we have to wait more than a few hours, we start to have challenge with it. We start to figure out if we can do something different. So that's the experiential economy, right? It's the Uber Eats. Even though we can go to the drive-in on our own, we have somebody else do it because it's an experience. It's easy. Well, the donor expectations are no different, right? You're competing at the end of the day, you're competing for the donor's attention. There's multiple different things that they can spend their money on and spend their disposable income and even donate to, right? It's education, sports, different philanthropies. There's a lot of different things. So how can you capture their attention and drive something in an experience-driven economy that makes them feel good, makes them feel excited about doing it? Well, that's where design thinking comes in. For sake of this application, because we only have 45 minutes or so, and I can go a little bit deeper depending, we're only going to really spend time on the first three segments: empathize, define, ideate. Prototype and test are really where you start building things and implementing them, right? So we'll talk about how do you get to that point of implementation. Well, as we talked about, empathy is the first step. Well, how do you empathize? Well, it's pretty easy. There's three main ways: observe, immerse, engage. We do this every day. And a lot of people look for things that are more interesting, but it's pretty basic. Observe. What do? You sit and you watch your end customer. Watch your donor. What are they doing? What are they investing in? How do they work every day? What drives them, right? Do they drop their kids off at school in the morning? What do they do at night? Where do they spend their time? Watch them, because all of those are cues to what will make a great experience for them. I always talk about in my own right, if you ask me to come to something after hours, if it's not a business thing, I bring my family. If any of y'all have been to like Small Business of the Year, we were a finalist the last 2 years. I brought my kids. I was probably one of the only ones to bring my kids. But that's one of my values, right? So if you're looking at me as a donor, well, how do you incorporate the family? I'm no different than most. Immerse. So try things, try to experience the things that your donor does or your user does. Going through the process yourself. It's amazing that we work with a large moving and storage company. And when we started working with them, they were like, man, we have the best process. The best people in our call center. We have the best online experience. We're really good. Well, when we started to immerse ourselves in it, we found a lot of different elements that could be better. Just because you're good doesn't mean you can't be better. And just because one person looked at an experience doesn't mean it's the best it can be, right? Going back to that multidisciplinary team is that I'll look at it a little bit different than you'll look at it. So immersing yourself will always give you items that you can pick up on that you can do better within the experience. And then engage. This is the part that most of us do really well, is just talking to our users, talking with their donors, intercepting them at encounters. Not sure if many of y'all are using Net Promoter Score. This is where like a Net Promoter Score would come into play, is what are those moments that matter? What are those places that you can intercept an experience? And then how can you capture feedback at that experience? So you don't have to capture a huge survey. You can capture just a little bit of information as they're going through the experience. But at the end of the day, you're just trying to find out what they want, right? And what people say they want is not necessarily what they really want. You would never know that the family is so important to me that I bring to them things if you were just asking me in a business context what's important to me. If you ask me, if you come to my office, I'll talk to you about sales. I'll talk to you about a lot of different things. Same with many people. But when you really get me out and you get my guard down, different things become very important. I'm sure all of y'all are very similar. Start with the end in mind, right? So how do you find out what they want? Start talking about the end goal. This is what JL and I were talking yesterday. We said, what's the big vision? What are we trying to raise money for? How can we get people excited? What's that $100 million idea? And then how do we break it down? How do we come back a little bit? How do we start breaking it down into pieces? And that's the journey, right? Is that if you have this big, huge goal at the end, and then you start to understand before, during, and after what it looks like, and then you can communicate that to people, makes fundraising a lot easier. Once again, remember, people are emotional, they're not logical. We all align to stories. We all align to stories, and we forget that. We want to show them numbers. We want to show them results, right? Well, most people, it's not about numbers and results. It's about, how did they feel at the end? What is the connection? I know a couple, I know that I have a very good friend. He gave a lot to a hospital, quite honestly, because his mother was a nurse, passed away young, and there was a huge connection there. If you would have just asked them about that question, probably would have never brought it up, because it's a feeling that is not one that they want to share. But if you get to know them and you get to understand them and you immerse within their world, you start to understand this, and then you can understand how to connect the experience to it, right? So how do you do this? Well, first of all, the easiest tool is a persona profile. I'm sure many of you all use personas, but it's really just trying to say who's the individual, what's the general description of them, what are their goals, what are their attitudes, what do they say, and what's their name and position and items like that. The funny thing is, as you start to talk with more and more people, we're not as different as we think we'd want to be, right? We end up hanging out with people that are like us, that have similar values to us, similar challenges. So when you build personas and you get a couple of them together, they start aligning. We laugh because when we're doing this work for some of our clients, we end up with like 5 personas, and we're like, no, there should be a lot more. But it's not that complicated. People start to align. And then reality, your target persona because there's so many personas out there, but your organization, your mission statement, your what you can provide them is different for everyone. So if you don't align with their goals, don't try to force it. Go find the people that you do align with their goals on, right? You can always educate and you can always expand, but the easy ones are the ones that are your targets, are the ones that have the items and the values that match with yours. Ooh, journey map. We talked about journey map. So this is probably the number one best tool for empathy and for trying to figure out how to get more donors and get more from your donors and also to drive larger donations. So it's trying to understand that decision process and what are the individual stages and how can you make those stages unforgettable. So the first is the stage, right? So normally it would be things like awareness, engagement, maybe donation at that point, and then maybe a deeper engagement or maybe even a board engagement at that point, right? That you're going to make them aware of your organization, you're going to get them engaged, you're going to get them to be active and to donate, and then you're going to get them to be an advocate for you out in the community to drive even more. That might be the stages. Now, you'll notice in the strategy map, all these items are blank because everybody's stages are a little bit different depending on your organization, depending on how you go to market, right? A hospital would be a little bit different than an eye institute, than a children's home. Everything's a little bit different in how you approach, but that's fine. What's your core objective is next in that stage. So like awareness, make people aware of you. Donate to capture funds. It's not that hard, but mapping it out. What are the tasks that you need to go through or does the user need to go through? And that's actually a pretty good item, is that it's not what you need to do, it's what your user needs to do and how your user goes. So don't create this based on you or the organization. Create this based on their user. So what are the tasks to becoming aware? A friend tells me about it. I find out about it online. I get an email. I'm interested. Maybe I bid on some silent auction elements. What are the tasks associated with me deciding to donate? Right? There's lots of things I can give to or others can give to. So how do I make that decision? What's my decision-making process? What are the tools that we use to help that along? Right? So if we talk to our end customers and we observe them and we notice that they're spending a lot of time online, then do we have the right tool in place? Do we have a website? Do we have the right stories? Are we using social media correctly? Now, the flip side of that goes too. You might find that your donors don't spend any time online. So don't spend time there. And I'm using simple examples, but you kind of get where I'm going is remember your user and invest in the tools that are going to help you connect to those tasks that the user is doing. The outcomes, right? What do we need to do to get to the next step? So if I'm moving somebody from awareness to engagement, what is that outcome? Are they coming to an event? Are they signing up for more information? Are they signing up for our email? What have you? And then finally, moments that matter. Moments that matter are probably the single most important element. And the moments that matter are those items that can make or break a situation. And what I mean by that is, have you ever been to a restaurant and you're very excited about the opportunity to go to the restaurant and you sit down, you're seated, everything's going great, but nobody comes over to take your drink order? Minute goes by, 2 minutes goes by, 5 minutes goes by. All of a sudden you're kind of frustrated, right? You're like, this is supposed to be a great restaurant with great service. And I'm sitting here twiddling my thumbs. I don't have my drink yet. Nobody's even come to greet me. The food won't taste as good. The service won't, even if everything goes perfect after that, It's already disconnected, right? I used to work at a restaurant a long time ago, and we had a minute wait time before we took their drink order. So when somebody sat at a table, you had to get their drink order within a minute, because they knew based on studies that if you took over a minute, everything started to slide after that point. So think about each stage in your donor process and connecting with your donor. And what are those moments that matter that could make or break the whole situation that you can't recover from? Or that you can use to your advantage to get people more connected to you, right? So it's a double-edged sword. It can be negative or it can be extremely positive. One thing that I didn't go into right after I sold my last company, I had some health issues. There were a lot of people that came to me and went out of their way to help me. Because they knew I just sold my company. They knew I was recovering from some health issues, and they were doing everything they could in their power to help me think through what I was going to do next or whatever. Man, just that one helping hand connects you with somebody forever, right? All they had to do was reach out, and they're connected to me, and I'm a pretty good advocate for a lot of people. So think about those moments that matter that can be positive. Little things, some of these you already do, like birthday cards, right? Wishing somebody a happy birthday when they're not expecting it puts them over the moon. But then think about as they go through and they donate, right? How do, if you get a large donation, how do you work with them and further connect them? Now, some people don't want to be further connected. Some people don't want to be recognized. Very good friend that owns a large restaurant, and he is a very quiet individual. He gives to a lot of causes, but he doesn't want anybody to know. That's just who he is. But that's the moment that matters for him is just being happy about giving. That's not the same for everybody else, but it doesn't matter. It's what is the moment that we're looking for. So then define. So now that we have the map and we understand the journey, where do we define these opportunities, right? Where do we say, where are we going to spend our money? Where are we going to spend our time as fundraisers? Well, we want to define the opportunity statement or the problem statement, depending on which way you want to look at it. And the easiest way to think about it is the user, the actionable needs, and the insights that we got. So an example of that would be Doug Pace, actionable need. Well, actually, let's use something outside the realm. I had a client one time that just needed a large audience, that they wanted to pull a large audience. So if you look at it, Doug Pace, actionable need, has a client that needed to pull a large audience. And then the insights, well, Doug can get a pretty good donation for that, get pretty good funding for that. And can we help him? That's one that's kind of way out in left field. Another one could be Doug Pace, actionable needs. It's very connected to his family. So you get it. All we're trying to do is connect the dots here. One tool that we use to really get to the root cause or the root challenge is the 5 whys in this scenario. So it's also called laddering. It's why, right? It's the 3-year-old scenario. So if I tell you that I'm not interested in, or I am interested in the medical field, and you ask why, and I go, well, my dad was a doctor. Well, why was your dad a doctor? Well, my dad's dad was a doctor. Well, why was your dad's dad a doctor? Well, because my grandfather was a doctor. Well, wait, that's kind of interesting already. Well, why didn't you go into the medical field? Well, because, it just wasn't me. I was more interested in other things. The more you can ask why, the more you can get to that deeper root cause, right? If you go back to the family scenario, why, right? I told you I had some medical issues. I almost passed away. So I made a decision that I involve my family in almost everything. So why? If you got to those why scenarios, you'd find that out about me. And then you can help me help myself and help you by talking about that and connecting it to your mission. Now, once again, not everybody is a potential donor, right? You got to remember that. Some people are attracted to one mission. Some people are attracted to another. But if you can use why as you're trying to define a opportunity statement, then you can really get to the emotional cause. Going into brainstorming. So when you go into brainstorming and you think big, you always want to start with a defined problem. What are you trying to solve for? What's your mission? What are you really trying to move? We always coach people, especially in a group, create your own ideas first, then come together as a team. Why do you think we do that? A lot of people don't work well when people are putting things on the wall, right? We all think at different speeds. We all come up with things in a different matter. So if I put you all in a team and I threw you to a wall, there'd be a couple people in the background still thinking while the whole rest of the group are executing on some ideas. So by having everybody create their own ideas first, then bringing them together, it's a little bit more powerful. One thing that I always talk about in here too is the size of a team as you start to facilitate things like this. There's the Ringelmann effect and social loafing. Don't know if you know about either one of them. Ringelmann effect is the tendency for a team to get less effective as you add more people. Ever been on a team of 3 and you're really effective, then you get a team of 6 and it's not so much, and then a team of 10 and you feel like you're dysfunctional? That's the Ringelmann effect, right? So everybody has their own ideas. Everybody's trying to push some of their own concepts, and it becomes unruly. Social loafing is kind of the exact opposite, where a couple people in the team go, the team's got it covered. I'll be over here. You're good. Call me if you need me, because they feel like they can't get in. So normally when you're brainstorming and you're bringing together ideas, the ideal size is about 6. The math and studies have all shown that. When you get to about 10, it starts to fall apart. So between 6 and 10 is where it's kind of weird. Go wide, not deep. We already talked about this, is that when you're brainstorming, you want to go crazy. You want to think of the craziest ideas ever. There are no bad ideas. Why are there no bad ideas? I'm actually going to jump. Don't know if any of y'all are Disney fans. One of the concepts that their Imagineers have is plussing. And their concept around it is a bad idea can become a very good idea. So instead of saying, hey, that's a bad idea, and when you tell people that's a bad idea or you don't collect their ideas, what do you think it does to it? What if I told you, hey, that's a bad idea. That's a horrible idea. Well, you shut down. You don't want to play with me anymore, right? Through plussing, what you do is you go, okay, let's put that on the board. And then you start to plus it. So an example of that would be, well, we could put seats on the wings of airplanes. Okay, that's a horrible idea, but let's put it on the thing. Yes, and we can make those a premium ticket, because being on the seat on the airplane wings be really cool, right? Yes, and if the seats were on top of it, it'd be better view and better aerodynamics. And then it turns into what you see. Actually, this airplane itself just got in prototype by Boeing, where they actually have a capsule on top of the airplane. So how does that apply to you, right? So as you're starting to think about what you're going to raise, JL, this probably sounds pretty familiar because we kind of went through this yesterday, is another board member had an idea. JL plussed it, I plussed it, JL plussed it, the other board member plussed it. And by the time we got off the phone, we were ruling the world. It was amazing. But that's what plussing is all about, right? Is to take the different ideas and just keep building and building and building. When you're really good at plussing, you can also go different directions, right? So you can essentially take an idea that maybe not feasible, and kind of move it over to the left. Because, like the airplane thing, you could have gone and you could have gone, okay, let's put them on the wings of airplanes. Go back to the laddering. Well, why? Why did you ask that? Well, because the view's really good. Man, there's probably other ways we can get some great views. How can we get other great views? And you can go down different paths. But it's, what are you gonna, what's the storyline essentially that you're driving? What's the idea that you're driving? Multiple different ways to drive ideas and to get people engaged. The three that we normally use are brainstorming, brain walking, and sketch and storyboarding. Brainstorming's what you're probably used to. 1 + 1 = 3. You get 3 people in a room and you start coming up with things. Brain walking's a little bit different, and it starts to entice the writing your own ideas down. This is where you have groups of individuals and you mix them up after the end of about 5 minutes. So you let the group come together with some ideas, and then you move some people around and you let those groups come together with ideas. It kind of forces the plussing that we talked about, and it forces the merging of ideas, and it also forces the storytelling of ideas. And that's really important, right? The storytelling. So how do you communicate something to your constituents? How do you communicate something to your donors or even your board members to drive forward? And then sketch and storyboard. What's the difference between sketch and storyboard? Storyboard shows motion, right? So this is all about drawing pictures. Pictures is worth 1,000 words. We've all seen it, right? That if you're trying to raise money for a building, you need a picture, you need a concept. Even if it's not a building, right? And the more that visual you can be, the better off you are. And then storyboarding shows that motion so you can start to get into play. So if it's like a service idea or delivery idea, that storyboarding really comes. Constraints. So as we all know, at the end of this, we'll come up with ideas. We'll come up with a lot of ideas that we just don't have the resources for. Now, we don't want to lose those, right? Because they might be great ideas and we want to step towards them. Actually, I have a Fortune 100 company, and prioritization is where we spend most of our time. We have a lot of initiatives and we just start working on it. But you really want to look at, kind of use a 4-quadrant square. No-brainers, big bets, utilities, and non-starters. So it's kind of the high, the value to the user and the effort and the cost. So no-brainers are those ones that are high value, low cost. They're things that you can get done pretty quick, don't have to think about it, and there's a lot of value to your donor. So why wouldn't you do it, right? So go back, send the birthday card, what have you. The big bets, those are those big fundraising things, right? Those are those things that you're trying to create or move. Those are those big campaigns. Now, if we don't make big bets, we'll never get anything done. We won't get to where we can be. But you have to be, selective on your big bets. And then utilities and non-starters. Utilities are the ones that we just never do. Nobody really wants it. Utilities are the ones that nobody really wants, but it doesn't cost that much. So it might be improving a small process or some of the administrative things that we need to do our job. They need to get done. They shouldn't fall off, but might not need to be done tomorrow. And then the non-starters are obviously the ones that cost a lot that nobody wants. So finally, I told you all that to get to this because this is my favorite thing. Anybody familiar with strategy maps? Strategy map is an extremely important thing to me. We use it on almost every client that we use. And a strategy map was taught to me by Chuck Sykes. Everybody, I think, is local, so they all know Chuck. We've taken his strategy map and kind of modified it for our needs, but it's still very similar. Secret to the strategy map is it allows you to tell a story to your board. It allows you to tell a story to your constituents. And it's all on one page. And that you can drop in on anybody, and if they're the janitor or if they're the CEO, you can show them your strategy map and they'll understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, and where you're going. So let's break down that strategy map. So first of all, it's your mission vision. What is your mission vision? Now, just a word of caution, because this is a very mission-driven collection of people on here. It might not always be the mission of your organization. It might be the mission of your initiative or your campaign. So this doesn't have to be used at an organization level. It can be used at a campaign level, right? So mission vision for the campaign. So, for instance, JL, I'll pick on what we did yesterday just to put context in it. Your mission may be to prevent blindness, but your mission for this campaign might be to develop a world-class healthcare facility. Parallel, slightly different, right? External. So what goes on this line? And we always work in like sticky notes or cards. So on this line, you'd have a number of cards, right? So external. This is all about what does the customer want? So this might be what does the donor want in this case? So what does the donor want to see? And you come up with the idea. So in that example, right? So the donor would want to see, maybe world-class facilities, world-class doctors. They'd want to see a way to differentiate their name, branding opportunities. Internal. So how can we do it? So this is really what do your team members or what do your employees want? Very important, right? If you can't get everybody aligned to your mission to executing on it, you're not going to get too far. So the second line is all about internal, right? So maybe the CEO wants to be seen as a world-class expert. Maybe your CFO needs to drive X number of dollars of revenue. Maybe your, you can go on. It's what do the team members want? A lot of times we'll even come up and we'll put things like, pay and things along those lines, time off. It doesn't really matter. It's what do they want in order to achieve the mission? And if it helps to motivate them and drive them, we want to know it. Financial, what is the expected return? But this is really what do the stakeholders want, right? So this might be the board. What does the board want out of this? Does it move your mission? Does it provide financial returns? Does it need to break even? So I always think in terms of the end user, right? So this would be donor, team member, and board. And then after you have all of those related to the mission that you're trying to drive, what are the opportunities? These might be gaps too. In order to do this, we need to raise X number of dollars. In order to do this, we need to have a better fundraising mechanism. In order to do this, we need more engagement from this community. In order to do this, we need a partner. You might need several partners in order to accomplish something. So what are the opportunities? And then what are the strategies and initiatives to accomplish that? So you'll see that there's 3 boxes. I always try to keep 3 strategies. So each box is a strategy. And the initiatives would be the tactical things. So like a strategy could be, we need to communicate. And then the initiative could be, we need to create a content calendar. We need to invest in our PR strategy. It would be tactical items. Now the thing, invest in PR strategy is probably not a great example because it's not tactical enough. What we'd want to put on there is we need to release, 3 press releases over 2 months. We need to get published. We need to, things along those lines. So strategies and initiatives. So I normally focus on 3 strategies and then obviously multiple initiatives to get it done. Those initiatives really end up turning into your project plan, right? Those are your high level things. And then you have steps to get those initiatives done. And then finally, KPIs. So how are you going to measure each strategy? Right? What's the outcome of each strategy? So if we say we're going to communicate more, man, how do we measure that? Do we measure that by number of times we were mentioned in a newspaper? Do we measure that by how many people said they saw one of our communications. If we were building a building, right? How do we measure the progress to building a building? Obviously, fundraising is one part of it, but there's multiple other elements of that. You know, is there kind of a KPI that we could create about getting architectural plans done? What are those numbers that you can put to the strategies to show that you have progress? So final thoughts. It's pretty easy. All you're trying to do is understand what your donor really wants. Think big, create an experience, make a lot of small bets. We talked about, you know, how do you break things down into initiatives? How do you prioritize? So it's make a lot of small bets and then double down on them as they start to pay off. And then understand the path to success is messy. A lot of people start in design thinking and they get about halfway through and they stop. Because if you're doing it well, and there's a great slide on this, I didn't include it. Looks like a big squiggle, and then all of a sudden it turns into a flat line. Because the more things you get moving, the more they seem that they're out of control. But then all of a sudden, if you have a good strategy, especially through a strategy map, they start to come together at the end. Understanding the question's half the answer. If you can understand what those users really want, and you define your problem statement or your opportunity, that helps you get there a lot quicker. So that's all I got. I think I was under time, which is good, right?
It's amazing. So let me see. Does anyone have any questions for Doug? I have not seen any in the chat. I was so interested in listening to you talk that.
I'm so boring.
Oh no. So there is one that just popped in. When do you start? I get. So it says wait. From Paul to everyone. Okay, that's a bad idea. When do you start? Let's see. What was he responding to? I was like, wait, what are you asking the question? All right.
I don't understand the question.
Neither do I. I'm like, wait a second. What did you say that I missed the part on that? So
Well, I
no
know I talked about there are no bad ideas, right? And you want to plus it and you want to keep things moving. The big thing with design thinking too, a lot of people overplay. If you look at on the internet and you start researching on design thinking, it's been overblown. It's a simple, elegant process. You know, as I said, we use the Stanford 5 steps model. All it is about really watching your users, talking to your users, in this case, donors. But you can obviously use it to work with your board too, right? And try to understand. But if you have empathy for the end user, the customer that you're serving, then all design thinking does is give you a framework to help you get what you want out of it. One thing that came to mind as I was talking about the donors and customers and things like that, a lot of people tend to forget that we have different levels of customers, right? So I have a team at Stonehill, they're all my customers. I have, you know, some advisory board members, they're all my customers. I have people that pay our bills that want our services, they're all my customers. In some ways, my wife is my customer. Because if I don't deliver, it's going to be bad for me. But it's really that simple.
There was a question that came in. How many of these plans do you have going at one time? One per year? Curious about the frequency and how often you revisit your strategic design thinking map.
Okay, so the strategy map, how many of those? So you'd really only have one strategy map going at one time because you'd have multiple strategies in that map, like we said, 3, and then multiple initiatives underneath it. So you might have, you know, I have one client right now that's kind of a mid-sized client, and they have 9 initiatives going on at one time. Now, obviously, they assigned it to different people, or some people have 2 or 3 initiatives to their own name. The initiatives don't have to be big. We subscribe to what's called a sprint-based mindset as well. Sprint comes from agile project management, and all sprint is that you're trying, those initiatives, what you want to do is keep them, that you can complete them in roughly a 2-week time frame. Because we all know if we start to manage an initiative and it's 6 months, sometimes we even forget why we started the initiative. So by keeping them in kind of sprints, now you might have multiple sprints to get to a larger initiative, but by keeping them in sprints, we always remember why we started it, what we want at the end, and it's pretty easy to keep people focused on the end goal. And that's, to be honest, that's the hardest part for me and my team with our customers, because obviously we don't implement everything that we plan out. We implement parts of it, and then the client implements parts of it. And as you can imagine, they have other jobs that they're accountable for. So by keeping it in a very compact sprint-based mindset, it allows us to meet every week or every other week, and they know what they need to get done, and it's not overwhelming.
What has been I'm sorry, it just clicked up on me here. What is the smallest element that you have used design thinking on? How do you prioritize making small changes for the betterment of the end user?
Well, we use it for a lot of small elements. I mean, shoot, we used it for changing an invoice for one of our clients, just the layout of an invoice, because we got feedback on, there was confusion between what was an invoice and what was a statement. Obviously, a statement's showing all the invoices that they have, but the end user didn't know. And then, the feedback from the accounting department was, well, it says at the top, invoice and statement. Well, the user doesn't know, right? I don't know, whatever. So we went through design thinking to resolve that problem. But that's real small, right? Like that's just changing a document.
It seems so small, but in the end user benefit is so huge, and it probably helps you get paid faster. I mean, so
well, that's the internal was even bigger, right? Because the accountants don't have to answer the phones, answer all the questions, get upset that the users don't, that the end customer doesn't know. So everybody's happier, right? It's going back to that strategy map. What does our customer want? What does our team want? And then what does our board want? The board wants to get paid fast. The team doesn't want any headaches, and the customer wants to understand what they owe you.
Make it easy. And using the design thinking, you're taking all those elements into consideration. So if you want to dig deeper on this topic, can you recommend additional resources to read, books, blogs, podcasts, anything?
The Kelly brothers, there's lots of book out by Tom and David Kelly. They founded a company called IDEO, which was really considered kind of the grandfather of design thinking. They helped commercialize design thinking back in the mid 80s with Stanford. Now, design thinking really comes from much earlier than that. You could make argument. I don't know if you guys are World War II fans, but at the end of World War II, management science was actually founded, where they brought together different engineers and strategists and people on the ground. And you can make an argument that they were called the whiz kids, and they actually ended up going to Ford and helping Ford grow after World War II. But you can make a claim that that's where design thinking started. But David Kelly and Tom Kelly, they have probably 10 books out. That's an easy element. If you search online, there's a lot of resources. It's pretty easy. And then we have our own design thinking training that Stonehill's created. So we have online courses that we created, and we have done some of those in conjunction with USF, and then some of them in conjunction with some of our clients. So you're getting kind of the best of all elements in those trainings as well.
That's very cool. There was one other comment, kind of. I find it's often difficult to get people used to creative thinking. I know there are several books out on developing creative thinking. Do you have a favorite among them? For example, along the lines of Perez Brown's How to Have Kick ASS
Yeah.
Ideas.
I love the question around creative thinking. I love it. I focus more on the experience side for some reason. And creative thinking is an outcome of that experience side. But I find that focusing on the experience, I can get more people tied to me as I start to bring them through a process. Because actually, Creative Confidence is a great creative thinking book. And I don't know if you guys have read it. It's all about how people are afraid of the white sheet of paper, the blank sheet of paper. And some people feel that they don't have that skill set and they can't even start to create something new, that they just want to follow an existing process. But the challenge with that is you still get pushback from, people that feel like they can't be creative. So I look for experience because everybody seems to gravitate to wanting to create the best experience for their end user. And then you can kind of pull them along with you. I'm trying to think, there's a great book out by, it's about Mercedes experience and what they've done to create their customer experience. I can't remember the name. I can get it to you. But elements like that are what I focus on more. Sorry, I'm not a big book guy. I read a lot, but I don't remember the names.
I was on a call recently with someone. A lot of folks were asking this, and they're like, I focus so much on my business. They're like, I want to read for pleasure. It's not always about work. And does anyone else have any questions for Doug? I don't see any more in the chat. I did have a question earlier. If you would share your PowerPoint.
Yeah.
So if you would please email that to me, I can include that with the recording for afterwards for folks.
Not a
So
problem.
thank you very much. And with that, I think we'll turn it back over to Miss JL.
Thank you, Doug. Thanks. I was sharing at the very top of the call that when I met with Doug yesterday, I had a lot of homework. Now I'm realizing exactly how much homework I have to do. But I love, Doug, how you applied these principles and made them specific to fundraising. I see that Nora is saying that she would love to see us come back after we complete our organization's map to see how this framework works in practice in conjunction with our development practice standards. So maybe that is something that we can share and update as we move along in our work at Lions Eye Institute. I just want to close the meeting. I don't see any other questions, but again, I want to close the meeting again by thanking you, Doug. I appreciate the time that you have spent with us. And I would be remiss if I didn't thank Chandra Tracy for all of the hard work. You can't imagine the countless emails that come through when you're the chapter administrator, and there's a tremendous number of hours. There's so much time that Chandra spends, not just with me, but other members of the executive team and the AFP board. And Chandra, you've been incredible, and this has been an extremely unusual year, but you've really stepped up, and we are a better organization because of it. I think we'll just go ahead and close the meeting. I wish everyone a happy holiday and a happy new year. We all look forward to a better 2021, and completely behind and support the new slate of board members. Again, well wishes to all, season's greetings, and we'll see you soon.